On the rattling red line train of Chicago during rush hour, Arthur Sterling sat motionless like a statue carved from regret, ignoring the bustling crowd and the cold seeping through the cracks. Outside the fogged windows, December snowflakes fell thick and fast, blanketing the city's red brick roofs in white. Arthur shivered slightly, though not from the cold. His bespoke gray wool coat was expensive enough to shield him from any wind off Lake Michigan, but it couldn't stop the chill blowing through his soul. Today marked the 9th anniversary of the worst decision of his life, a choice that had turned him from a man full of love into a successful but solitary tycoon. He stared at his aged reflection in the dark glass, his eyes hollow and weary, wondering if anyone in this world truly recognized his existence beyond his contracts and bank balance. The crackling speaker announced the next stop, and the doors slid open, admitting a blast of freezing air and a fresh wave of commuters. Weaving through the wall of leather briefcases and hurried heels was a small figure. A black boy, no older than 8, struggled to drag a recycled plastic bag that looked heavy enough to anchor a ship. He wore a blue puffy coat that had seen better days. The insulation clumped in spots, making it look comically oversized. His sneakers were frayed, soaked through with slush. No one offered the boy a seat. The adults around him remained glued to their phones or feigned sleep. The boy seemed used to it. He scanned the car and quickly slipped into the only empty spot right next to Arthur. A warmth radiated from him, carrying the scent of a pharmacy and old bread, a smell so grounded in reality that Arthur unconsciously held his breath. Arthur shifted slightly, maintaining the polite distance of the upper class. The boy didn't notice. Once settled, clamping his precious cargo between his legs, he began to swing his short feet that didn't quite reach the floor. And then, over the rhythmic screech of the wheels on the tracks, a clear sound emerged. "Oh, my love, my darling, I've hungered for your touch." Arthur stiffened. It was Unchained Melody, the song he and she used to listen to in that small apartment filled with laughter 9 years ago. His heart felt squeezed. He turned, staring at the child. The boy had his eyes closed, head bobbing slightly, humming with a strange focus and passion, as if the melody were a shield protecting him from the cold and the world's indifference. Sensing the gaze, the boy opened his eyes. They were big, bright, and looked straight at Arthur without fear. He stopped singing, tilting his head to study the man's crisp suit and stern face. "Are you a cop?" the boy asked, his voice high but polite. Arthur blinked, caught off guard. "No, I'm not." "Why do you ask?" "Because you wear all gray." The boy pointed at the coat, then at Arthur's face. "And you look sad." "My mom says cops are always sad because they have to catch bad guys all day." Arthur let out a dry, rare chuckle. "I don't catch bad guys. I'm just tired." "Then you should listen to music," the boy said seriously, sharing an important secret. "Mom says music is medicine for the heart. Whenever I'm sad or cold, I sing. It makes me feel warmer." The innocent yet painfully wise words silenced Arthur. He looked down at the bulging bag at the boy's feet. "What's in there that's so big?" "Medicine for my mom and some discount groceries." The boy patted the bag proudly. "Mom's sick today. She couldn't get up, so I went instead. I'm the man of the house, you know." The train began to slow, the dim lights of the South Side station flickering into view. This was a working-class neighborhood, a place men like Arthur rarely visited. The boy scrambled to gather his things, but the bag was too heavy, causing him to stumble as the train lurched. Instinctively, Arthur reached out, steadying the boy's shoulder. The doors opened. The wind howled louder than ever. The boy took a deep breath, bracing himself to lift the heavy straps, but the bag barely budged. "Let me help you with that," Arthur said, his voice warmer than he expected. He stood up, lifting the heavy plastic bag with gentle ease. "That bag is almost as big as you are." The boy looked up, eyes widening in surprise before crinkling into delight. Together, they stepped out of the car, a wealthy man carrying a cheap plastic bag alongside a poor child. As they stepped onto the windy platform, Leo beamed. "Thank you, sir. My mom says sad people are usually the kindest. They just forgot how to smile." The words made Arthur ache. Arthur never thought he would set foot in the South Side at this hour, a place where old red brick apartment buildings stood shoulder to shoulder, shivering in the biting winter wind like huddled giants. The streetlights here flickered with a dull orange glow, illuminating piles of gray slush that hadn't been cleared for days. Leo, however, walked with the confidence of a king returning to his castle. He marched ahead, navigating the cracked pavement while Arthur struggled to keep pace in his Italian leather dress shoes. "Watch the puddle there, it's deep," Leo warned over his shoulder, his breath puffing out in little white clouds. "We're almost there. It's just me and Mom now. Dad got lost a long time ago, so I have to be the man of the house." The innocent phrase struck Arthur harder than the freezing wind. "Lost?" he echoed, his voice tight. "Yeah. Mom says he lost his way," Leo chirped, turning into a building with a heavy, rusted iron door. "But she says good people always find their way back eventually." They climbed 2 flights of wooden stairs that groaned under Arthur's weight. The hallway smelled faintly of boiled chicken soup and dried herbs, a scent of survival and home. Leo stopped at a door where the paint was peeling away in long, dry strips, revealing layers of colors from decades past. "Mom, I'm home," Leo announced, pushing the door open. "And I brought a friend to help." The apartment was small, warmed only by a space heater humming in the corner. Books were stacked neatly on the floor, and colorful crayon drawings covered the fridge, trying to brighten the faded wallpaper. Vanessa was standing by the kitchenette, wrapped in a worn knitted shawl. She looked thinner than Arthur remembered, her cheekbones sharp against her skin, but she still held herself with that same stubborn grace. She turned, a glass of water in her hand. When her eyes landed on the man standing in her doorway, the gray coat, the silver hair, the ghost of a past she had tried to bury, her grip failed. Crush! The glass shattered on the linoleum floor. Water splashed everywhere. "Mom!" Leo dropped his bag and ran to her. Arthur stood frozen in the doorway. The silence in the room was deafening, louder than the train, louder than the wind outside. He looked at the woman he had loved, the woman he had abandoned to please a family that never cared about him. She looked bone-deep weary. "It's okay, I slipped," Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling. Her eyes never left Arthur's face. They were wide with shock, and something else, fear. "This is the nice man from the train," Leo explained quickly, grabbing a towel to dab at the water. "He helped me carry the big bag. He likes your song, Mom." Vanessa took a step back, her hand gripping the counter for support. "You," she breathed. She tried to straighten up, to muster the strength to order him out, but her body betrayed her. A violent cough racked her frame, bending her double. Arthur moved before he thought. He crossed the small room in 2 strides, catching her just as her knees gave way. Through the thin fabric of her shawl, he could feel how fragile she had become. She felt light, too light. "Let go of me," she gasped, but she didn't have the strength to push him away. "Leo, get your mom some warm water," Arthur said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. Leo nodded, wide-eyed, and scrambled to the sink. Arthur helped her sit on the worn velvet sofa. Up close, he saw the fine lines of worry etched around her eyes. She pulled away from his touch as if burned, wrapping the shawl tighter around herself. "Why are you here?" she hissed, her voice low so Leo wouldn't hear over the running tap. "Do you want something? Did you come to see how far we've fallen?" To laugh. "No," Arthur choked out. "I didn't know. I swear, Nessie, I didn't know." The old nickname made her flinch. She looked away, biting her lip to keep it from trembling. Arthur's gaze drifted to the kitchen, where Leo was carefully pouring water into a plastic cup, humming that tune again. He looked back at Vanessa, his heart hammering against his ribs. "The boy," Arthur started, his voice barely a whisper. "He has my eyes." "How old is he?" Vanessa turned back to him. The shock had faded, replaced by a fierce, protective fire. She looked straight into his soul, her gaze steady and challenging. "He's 8, Arthur," she said, her voice cutting through the air like shattered glass. "And he doesn't need a father who only knows how to run away." Dinner was a quiet affair, served in a kitchen that felt too small for the secrets it held. The air was thick with the scent of reheated chicken soup and toasted bread, a simple meal that somehow smelled better than any 5-star dinner Arthur had eaten alone in the past decade. Outside the frosted windowpane, the Chicago wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the loose frame, but inside, The small circle of yellow light from the overhead bulb created a fragile sanctuary. Arthur sat on a mismatched wooden chair that creaked under his weight. He held his spoon awkwardly, conscious of his cufflinks clinking against the cheap laminate table. Opposite him, Vanessa ate slowly, her hand trembling slightly every time she lifted the spoon. She was exhausted, her eyelids heavy, the fire in her eyes dimmed by the medication Leo had bought. "This soup is good," Arthur said, breaking the silence. His voice sounded too loud in the small room. "It's canned," Vanessa replied without looking up, her tone guarding against any pity. "We add our own spices. It makes it taste homemade. It's the secret ingredient," Leo chimed in brightly, dipping his toast into the broth. "Mom says you have to cook with love, or it just tastes like salt." He looked at Arthur, his eyes shining. "So, Mr. Arthur, do you like plays?" Arthur smiled, grateful for the bridge the boy offered. "I do. I used to go to the theater quite often. I'm going to be in one." Leo beamed, abandoning his soup to gesture with his hands. "The school is doing the Nutcracker for Christmas. I auditioned for the Tin Soldier Prince. I sang the solo better than anyone, even Tommy, and Tommy takes lessons. He has a beautiful voice," Vanessa added softly, a rare smile touching her lips as she looked at her son. "He gets it from his grandfather." She caught Arthur's eye for a split second, and the lie hung heavy between them. Arthur knew she meant him. But Principal Henderson acted weird. Leo's face fell slightly, his fingers drumming a rapid, complex rhythm on the table edge. "He kept looking at my hair and writing stuff down. He said they have to consider the traditional look for the prince." Arthur froze. He stared at Leo's fingers tapping on the table. Tap, 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 pause, tap. It was a nervous tick, a specific rhythmic pattern Arthur himself did during board meetings when he was thinking. Seeing it on this boy's small hands felt like looking into a mirror that spanned time. "Talent is what matters, Leo," Arthur said, his voice firm. "Tradition is just an excuse for people who are afraid of change." Vanessa finished her tea and tried to stand to clear the table, but her legs buckled. She swayed, grabbing the chair back. "Mom." Leo jumped up. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she clearly wasn't. "Just dizzy. Go to the couch, Nessie." "Please," Arthur said, the old nickname slipping out again. This time she didn't fight him. She let him guide her to the worn velvet sofa in the living room. She was asleep almost the moment her head touched the cushion, the exhaustion finally winning the battle. Leo tucked a knitted blanket around her with the tenderness of an adult. "She works 2 jobs, he whispered to Arthur. "But she got sick last week, and they didn't pay her for the days off." Arthur felt a wave of nausea not from the food, but from the guilt rotting his gut. While he had been deciding which vintage wine to open for dinner, they had been counting pennies for medicine. "I need to use the restroom," Arthur said, needing a moment to breathe. "It's down the hall on the left," Leo pointed. The bathroom was clean but told a story of poverty in every detail. The cracked tile repaired with duct tape, the faucet that dripped a steady rhythm. On the sink lay a pink plastic hairbrush, tangled with dark curls. Arthur stared at it. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew the truth in his gut, the eyes, the rhythm, the song, but the businessman in him, the coward in him, needed the cold, hard data. He needed to be 100% sure before he could tear down the walls he had built. With a trembling hand, he reached out. He felt like a thief in the night. He pulled a single long strand of hair from the brush, checking the root, and quickly wrapped it in his pristine white handkerchief. He shoved it deep into his pocket, feeling the weight of it like a stone. When he returned to the living room, the lights were dimmed. Leo was sitting on the floor near his sleeping mother, arranging a small army of plastic soldiers. "Are you leaving?" Leo asked, looking up. "I should. Your mom needs rest." Arthur put on his heavy gray coat. He hesitated by the door. "Leo, earlier you said your dad lost his way." Leo nodded, picking up a soldier with a missing arm. "Yeah. Mom says he was scared. She says sometimes people get scared of things they don't understand, and they run. But she also says he was a good man, deep down." Arthur felt tears prick his eyes. After everything, the abandonment, the silence, the struggle, Vanessa had never poisoned the boy against him. She had preserved his image, polishing a lie to keep her son's heart whole. "Do you think he'll ever find his way back?" Leo asked, his voice small in the quiet room. Arthur knelt on one knee, ignoring the crease it would put in his tailored trousers. He looked Leo dead in the eye. I think he's trying to find the map right now. And I think he's realizing that the place he ran from was the only home he ever really had." Leo studied him for a long moment, showing that wisdom that seemed too old for his years. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a mismatched wool mitten. It was gray, unraveling at the thumb, clearly a spare found in a lost-and-found box. "Here." Leo shoved it into Arthur's hand. "It's cold out there. You have fancy gloves, but this one is warm because it's magic. It helps you hold on to things you don't want to lose." Arthur stared at the mitten. He swallowed the lump in his throat and gripped it tight. "Thank you, Leo. I'll take good care of it." "You have to come back to return it." Leo grinned, a flash of mischief returning. "And to hear me sing when I get the prince role." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Arthur promised. He stepped out into the biting Chicago night. The wind whipped at his face, but he didn't button his coat immediately. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his private assistant, his fingers moving fast. "I need a DNA courier at my location in 20 minutes. Urgent. And contact Dr. Evans, the best pulmonary specialist in the city. Tell him I'm hiring him for a private case starting tomorrow morning." He hit send. He looked back at the dim window on the second floor. He wasn't the silent stranger anymore. He was a man with a mission, and for the first time in 9 years, the path home was crystal clear. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised steel, the kind of Chicago gray that seeped into your bones. But inside the hallway of Lincoln Elementary, the atmosphere was artificially bright. Tinsel garlands shimmered under the fluorescent lights, and paper snowflakes taped to the windows tried desperately to mimic the blizzard raging outside. Leo stood in front of the cork bulletin board, his small hands gripping the straps of his backpack until his knuckles turned ashen. A crowd of children jostled around him, chattering with the high-pitched excitement that only impending holidays could bring. But Leo was silent. He stared at the typed list pinned at eye level. Cast list, the Nutcracker. His eyes scanned down. The Mouse King, Tommy. Sugar Plum Fairy, Sarah. And there, at the very top, the role he had practiced for weeks. The role he had sung in the shower, on the train, and in his dreams, the Nutcracker Prince. Next to it was the name Jason Miller. Leo's name was at the bottom, listed under stage crew/props assistant. He didn't cry. He just swallowed hard, feeling a lump of ice form in his throat, and walked out into the cold without buttoning his coat. By the time Arthur arrived at the apartment that evening, bearing a bag of high-quality groceries and a toy soldier he'd bought on a whim, he knew something was wrong. The apartment was too quiet. There was no humming, no rhythmic tapping on the table. Vanessa was sitting at the kitchen table, her face flushed not with fever, but with a simmering, helpless rage. Leo was in his room, the door shut tight. "He won't come out," Vanessa said, her voice tight. "He didn't get the part, Arthur." Arthur set the groceries down slowly. "But he was the best one. You said the music teacher cried when he sang." "It wasn't about his voice." Vanessa stood up, her hands trembling as she smoothed her apron. She looked at him, her eyes burning with the pain of 1,000 similar cuts she had endured in her own life. "He told me what Principal Henderson said to him in the hallway. Henderson told him that the prince is a classical role, and they need someone who looks the part. He said they didn't want to confuse the audience with a prince who has curly hair and dark skin." The words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Arthur felt a cold fury rising in his chest, a sensation entirely different from the business stress he was used to. This was primal. It was the awakening of a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. "I'm going to the school board." Vanessa grabbed her purse, though she swayed slightly as she moved. "I'm going to tear that place down." Arthur caught her arm. His grip was gentle but firm. "No, Vanessa. Look at you. You're barely standing. You can't fight a war when you can't breathe." "I have to," she choked out, tears finally spilling over. "I can't let him think he's less than them. I can't let him learn this lesson so young." "He won't," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, turning into a low rumble of thunder. He took the purse from her hand and set it back on the table. "You rest. You get your strength back. Let me do this. Let me be the father who fights for him. Vanessa searched his face, looking for the man who ran away 9 years ago. She didn't find him. Instead, she found a man whose jaw was set in stone. She nodded slowly and sank back into the chair. Arthur drove to the school the next morning in his black sedan, ignoring his office's frantic calls. He wore his most expensive charcoal suit, the one he saved for hostile takeovers. He walked into the school office, the click of his polished shoes on the linoleum sounding like gunshots in the quiet room. The secretary looked up, startled. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here to see Principal Henderson," Arthur said. He didn't ask. He stated, "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him Arthur Sterling is here. Tell him it's regarding the integrity of his institution." 5 minutes later, Arthur was sitting across from Mr. Henderson. The principal was a man in his 50s with a thin smile and eyes that didn't quite match it. His office smelled of stale coffee and self-importance. "Mr. Sterling," Henderson said, leaning back in his creaky leather chair. "I must say I was surprised to hear you're representing Leo's family. A charitable interest." "A personal one," Arthur corrected coldly. He placed a printed copy of the cast list on the desk. "I want to know why the most talented vocalist in your school is moving props instead of singing the lead." Henderson sighed, a practiced sound of condescension. The casting. Look, Mr. Sterling, Leo is a sweet boy. Very spirited. But the Nutcracker is a tradition. It's a European fairy tale. We have to think about historical accuracy. We have to think about what the parents expect to see when the curtain rises. Jason fits the aesthetic of the prince better. Aesthetic. Arthur repeated the word, tasting the bile in it. "You mean he's white?" Henderson stiffened. "I wouldn't use such crude language. We are an inclusive school. But art relies on suspension of disbelief. We simply felt that a prince of Leo's background might be distracting for the audience. It breaks the immersion." Arthur stared at the man. He saw the polite racism that hid behind words like tradition and aesthetic. It was the same polite racism that had made his own mother whisper in his ear 9 years ago that Vanessa wasn't the right fit for the Sterling family image. Arthur stood up slowly. He leaned over the desk, placing his hands flat on the polished wood. He loomed over the smaller man, radiating the power of someone who owned skyscrapers. "Let me tell you about immersion, Mr. Henderson," Arthur said, his voice deadly quiet. "Immersion is destroyed when you teach a child that his worth is skin deep. Immersion is broken when you take a boy with the voice of an angel and tell him he belongs in the shadows because you are too narrow-minded to see his light." "Now see here, you can't speak to me like that," Henderson sputtered, his face turning red. "I am speaking to you exactly as you deserve." Arthur cut him off, slamming his hand down on the cast list. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. "You are stealing a dream from a child to comfort your own prejudices. I am giving you one chance. Put him in the role he earned." "The decision is final," Henderson snapped, trying to regain control. "The program is already printed." "Fine." Arthur straightened his cuffs, his face returning to an icy mask of calm. "Then you leave me no choice. You think your little stage is the only one in Chicago? You think you hold the keys to who gets to shine?" Arthur turned and walked to the door, stopping with his hand on the brass knob. He looked back, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous promise. "I'm going to build him a kingdom so bright that your little school play will look like a candle in the sun. And you, Mr. Henderson, will be the one sitting in the dark." He walked out, leaving the principal stunned and silent. The wind outside whipped at his coat, but Arthur didn't feel it. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. He dialed his top assistant. "Cancel my meetings for the week," Arthur commanded. "And get me the manager of the Chicago Grand Theater. Yes, the historic one downtown. I don't care what it costs. I want to rent the main stage for this Saturday night. We're putting on a show." He hung up and looked up at the gray sky. For the first time in years, the fire in his chest wasn't rage or regret. It was purpose. He was done being the sad stranger. It was time to be a father. The Chicago Grand Theater, a relic of the Roaring Twenties with its gold-leaf ceiling and velvet seats, glowed like a beacon in the winter night. The massive neon marquee outside buzzed against the falling snow, displaying a message that stopped passers-by in their tracks. Tonight only The Christmas Prince, starring Leo and friends. Backstage, the air smelled of hairspray, dust, and nervous energy. Leo stood in front of a vanity mirror surrounded by bright bulbs, staring at his reflection. He wore a costume that was a masterpiece of love, a red military jacket with gold braiding, sewn by Vanessa's tired hands over 3 sleepless nights, and pristine white trousers. But his hands were shaking. He gripped the edge of the table, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "I can't do it," Leo whispered to the mirror. "It's too big. The lights are too bright. What if Principal Henderson was right? What if I don't look like a prince?" Arthur stepped out of the shadows. He looked impeccable in a tuxedo, but his eyes were soft, filled with a warmth that melted the icy demeanor of the businessman he used to be. He knelt on one knee behind Leo, meeting the boy's gaze in the glass. Gently, he reached out and adjusted Leo's crooked bow tie, a tender, deliberate gesture that mirrored the way Leo had tucked the blanket around him just nights before. "Look at me, Leo," Arthur said softly. Leo turned. "Henderson was looking at a picture in a book," Arthur said, placing his hands on the boy's small shoulders. "But tonight, the audience isn't here for a picture. They're here for a soul. A prince isn't defined by the color of his skin or the texture of his hair. He is defined by his courage to lead with his heart. And you, Leo, have the biggest heart I've ever known." Leo took a deep breath. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Arthur smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Now, go out there and show them what royalty really sounds like." The curtain rose. The auditorium was packed. Arthur had pulled every string he had. Business partners, city council members, and wealthy donors filled the orchestra seats. But the balcony was filled with the people who mattered most: the neighbors from the south side, the shopkeepers, the kids who had been told they weren't good enough. And there, in the third row, sat Principal Henderson. He had received a VIP invitation he couldn't refuse without offending the city's biggest investor. He looked small and uncomfortable in the sea of expectant faces. The stage lights dimmed to a single spotlight. Leo walked out. He looked tiny on the vast stage, a speck of red and gold in the darkness. Silence fell over the room, heavy and suffocating. Then, Leo opened his mouth. The first note was clear, piercing through the silence like a bell in a snowstorm. He sang the Prince's Prayer, a soaring ballad about finding home. His voice, untrained but pure, carried a raw emotion that no amount of technical schooling could teach. It was the sound of a boy who had carried heavy bags on a frozen train, who had comforted a sick mother, who had sung to a sad stranger because he didn't want him to be lonely. As the song built to its crescendo, Leo didn't just sing, he shone. He commanded the stage with a natural grace that was undeniable. In the front row, Vanessa wept openly, her hand pressed to her mouth, witnessing her son transform from a poor boy into a king. When the final note faded into the rafters, there was a second of stunned silence. Then, the theater exploded. The applause wasn't polite, it was thunderous. People stood up. The wealthy elite and the working class cheered in unison. Arthur watched from the wings, his chest swelling with a pride so intense it hurt. He saw Henderson in the third row, not clapping, but staring up at the stage with a look of utter defeat and shame. The aesthetic argument had crumbled before the undeniable power of talent. Arthur walked onto the stage as the applause began to settle. He took the microphone, signaling for quiet. He put his arm around Leo's shoulders, pulling the boy close to his side. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur's voice boomed through the speakers, steady and commanding. "Thank you for witnessing true magic tonight." He paused, looking down at Mr. Henderson, locking eyes with the man. Some people told this young man that he didn't fit the image of a prince. They told him his history, his look, his background didn't belong in the spotlight. A murmur went through the crowd. But tonight, Arthur continued, his voice thick with emotion, turning to look down at Leo. He proved that dignity and talent have no mold. He is not just a performer. He is the bravest young man I know. Arthur took a breath, ready to cross the final bridge, ready to burn the bridge to his old, cowardly life. And he is not just a prince on this stage. His name is Leo Sterling. He is my son. And I have never been prouder to be his father. The gasp from the audience was audible, followed by a renewed, deafening wave of applause. The twist rippled through the room, the powerful tycoon claiming the Southside boy. Leo looked up at Arthur, his eyes wide, swimming with happy tears. "You told them," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You really told them." "I should have told them a long time ago," Arthur whispered back, squeezing his shoulder. Down in the audience, Vanessa smiled through her tears, seeing the man she once loved finally step into the light, not alone, but holding the hand of the future they had made together. The heavy velvet curtain began to close, but the image of the father and son standing together, bathed in the golden spotlight, burned into the memory of everyone present. Spring arrived in Chicago not with a shout, but with a gentle whisper. The aggressive winds off Lake Michigan softened into a breeze, and the gray slush on the sidewalks finally melted away to reveal the first brave shoots of green grass. The peeling paint of the Southside apartment was a memory now, replaced by the stained glass light of a small, historic chapel on a Saturday morning. The ceremony was intimate. There were no press cameras, no board of directors, just the people who mattered. Vanessa stood at the altar, radiant in a simple ivory dress, her health fully restored, her eyes clear and shining. She looked like a queen who had finally returned to her throne. "Do you have the rings?" the minister asked. Leo, looking sharp in a fitted navy suit that actually fit him perfectly this time, stepped forward. He didn't just hand over the rings. He held them out with a solemn pride. After the vows were spoken words about second chances and unbreakable bonds, there was one more piece of business to attend to. At a small table to the side, a lawyer laid out a document. Leo picked up the pen. He looked at Arthur, then at Vanessa, grinning that mischievous grin that had first appeared on a subway train. "So," Leo whispered loud enough for the front row to hear, "does this mean I officially get 2 Christmas presents every year now?" The small congregation chuckled. Arthur placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his throat tight with emotion. "You get everything, son. You get everything." Leo bent down and signed the paper in his careful, looping cursive. Leo Sterling. 10 years later. The Sterling residence was quiet, save for the crackling of the fireplace and the soft, intricate notes of a piano drifting through the high-ceilinged living room. Outside, a gentle snow was falling again, marking the cycle of another decade past. Arthur sat in his favorite leather armchair. His hair was completely white now, and he moved a bit slower, his joints complaining about the Chicago winters. But the lines of deep-etched sorrow that had defined his face on that train ride were gone, smoothed away by years of Sunday dinners, school recitals, and laughter. At the grand piano sat Leo. At 18, he was a handsome young man, his curly hair trimmed short, his posture straight. He was playing Unchained Melody, but not the simple, hummed version of a child. This was a complex, jazz-infused arrangement that filled the room with bittersweet beauty. Leo let the final chord hang in the air before turning on the bench. He looked at his father. "Dad." "Yes, Leo? Do you ever miss it?" Leo asked, his voice deep and thoughtful. "The empire? The deals? The skyscraper office? You gave up a lot of power to be with us." Arthur looked around the room. He saw Vanessa in the kitchen doorway, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa, smiling at them. He saw the framed photos on the mantelpiece. Leo's graduation, their trips to the lake, the 3 of them building a snowman. He looked down at his hands that used to hold only cold, hard cash, now holding a warmth that money couldn't buy. "I didn't give up power, Leo," Arthur said softly, meeting his son's eyes. "I gave up loneliness." He looked toward the window, where the snow fell softly against the glass, reflecting the warm glow of the room. "That day on the train, I was a man who had everything but possessed nothing. I was the one who was lost. You and your mother, you didn't just need me. You saved me. I didn't lose a lifestyle, son. I found a life." Leo smiled, that same bright, heart-stopping smile that had once disarmed a sad stranger. He turned back to the keys and began to play a new song, something upbeat, something full of hope. Arthur closed his eyes, listening to the music. The silence of his past was gone forever, replaced by the beautiful, imperfect, everlasting symphony of a family made whole. Just like the melody that found its way back to Arthur's heart, true family isn't always about who you are born with, but who you are brave enough to stand by. We often judge people by their worn coats or their silent struggles, Yet as Leo taught us, the richest treasures are often hidden in the humblest packages. If this story warmed your spirit today, please share it with someone who might need a reminder that kindness is the only royalty that truly matters.